Ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to thank y'all so much for tuning in to this particular story. This story is really near and dear to my heart, and we've been waiting for this day for a long time. And I say we, as in a lot of people in Oklahoma, as in a lot of people from the north side, a lot of people who originally went to John Marshall High School in Oklahoma City. This story is very huge to a lot of people who support an individual by the name of Julius Jones, who we all believe and finally got a chance to hear from, which was amazing after 22 years of his voice not being heard, but 22 years of being falsely accused of a murder that this man did not commit and was being put on death row for something he did not do. And we believe that he's finally getting his voice heard and finally going to be able to be vindicated and to be able to get out of not only death row, but get out of prison and hopefully be able to just restart his life, even though he lost 22 years of his life. But with that being said, let me preface before I start talking about this story and showing the actual clemency hearing. When we advocate for the justice of Julius Jones, it does not mean that we're going against the family of Paul Howell, because all of us wanted to see justice for the death and murder, senseless murder of Paul Howell. Anybody who was connected to that, for leading up to that, should have been held accountable properly, and they did not. Even the murderer of Paul Howell, we believe, who we know who that person is, was not held accountable for that murder, and definitely not held for it properly. We've even heard murmurs of people making jokes. People wrote statements of the individual, Chris Jordan, of making jokes about murdering him and pinning the murder on somebody else. People around him knew what really happened and blamed the man that you see on my screen for the murder that he did not do. Wrong place, wrong time. And this is a perfect, clear example of when you hang around the wrong people, you could get caught up in their bullcrap. That's the story of Julius Jones. Been in jail since 1999, and he might finally get a chance to get out. And we do hope that justice is served in the proper way, and that Governor Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma will accept the clemency recommendation that was made by that board. And I'll show you guys that video here in just a moment. But we pray and hope that his heart is put in the right place to be able to let Julius Jones go. Let me give you guys the fair usage. Show you guys this video real quick. Let's get it. Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without the authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use. It is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107. And again, I ask you guys to listen to this with an open mind as well as an open heart. This was shown live, so a lot of people didn't actually get to hear Julius Jones' words, and for 22 years, nobody, even the jury in the courts and people in the court when this whole thing was going on, never got to hear his actual words. So you're going to get to hear directly from Julius Jones, his own words, his own way, the full story. Let's get it.
All right. Have you been viewing and hearing the proceedings this morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So you know that you've got 20 minutes to address the board. We will also have time for questions at the end of that if any board members have questions. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we're going to start the timer and you can begin now.
Good morning to the honorable members of this board and to the honorable Governor Stitt. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Julius Jones, and this is the first chance that I've had in over 20 years to talk about what happened and where I was that on the night Mr. Paul Howell was senselessly murdered. I want to be clear about two things. First, I feel for the Howell family and for the tragic loss of Mr. Paul Howell, who I've heard was a caring and all-around good person and father. Second, I am not the person responsible for taking Mr. Howell's life. I was not involved in the planning of this robbery. I was not present during this robbery, and I did not know that anyone had been killed until the day after Mr. Howell was murdered. I'm going to try to give you a better sense of who I was at the time. I was 19 years old and trying to work my way off of academic probation at OU. The year before, I had received a presidential leadership class scholarship to attend OU because of my athletic and academic achievements while at John Marshall High School. I had graduated 11th in my class with 3.68 GPA. I had also played varsity basketball and football. During my sophomore year, I was proud to be part of making John Marshall sports history with my teammates when we won state championships in football and basketball while going undefeated in each of these sports that season. That's the only time this had been done in state history. Throughout my high school years, I played under the tutelage of Coach Tommy Griffin, who demanded a lot from his players on and off the court. Coach Griffin also expected a lot from me in particular. He would hold study hall before practice, and I was one of the players he called upon to tutor my teammates in subjects they were struggling with. He expected me not only to be a teammate, but a captain and a mentor as well. At the time, I thought Coach Griffin was being unfair to me by being so hard on me and having expectations for me that he didn't have for others. But looking back, I realized that Coach Griffin was hard on me because he seen something in me that I didn't see in myself. My best friend since childhood and throughout my time at John Marshall was Jimmy Lawson. Jimmy's dad was a preacher and, like my own father, had served in the military. Our parents were strict and demanded only excellence out of us. They pushed us to be the very best we could be academically, and we both graduated in the top 10% of our class. I first met Chris Jordan during my junior year at John Marshall when he enrolled to start playing basketball with us. Chris was rough around the edges. The rumor was he had been kicked out of his previous school, and pretty much it was known he was gang member. I recall that at one point Chris was kicked out of John Marshall for fighting. Although Chris and I played basketball together for a couple of years at John Marshall, we really weren't friends and didn't run in the same circles. It was during my last year at John Marshall that I started to lose focus. My older brother, Antonio, who was 2 years ahead of me, was already playing football at OU. And through him, I was able to meet and spend time around older guys who were the Division I athletes I aspired to be. People like Eduardo Nahara and Michael Johnson. Even though I was still in high school, I was able to play in unofficial off-season camps in OU and hope to play Division I basketball there the following year. Being exposed to the world of Division I sports at 17 and 18 years old exposed me not only to the greatest athletes, but also to people who had nice things that I wanted to have, but that my parents couldn't afford. Now, my family wasn't poor, but we didn't have a lot of money. My mom was a public school teacher and has been for the past 40 plus years. And my dad worked construction after his military service. They worked hard to provide for me and my siblings, and we never missed meals. But they also weren't rich and didn't have a lot of money to buy all the things that I saw people my age or a little older with and that I thought I needed in order to fit in, or rather to stand out. So I started to shoplift in order to have nice things that were beyond my means, and to impress the ladies who I thought would like me more for what I had and for what I could give them, rather than for who I was as a person. I stole things that I could wear or resell, like clothes, pagers, necklaces, CDs, shoes, and I also took tests for people using fake IDs for a fee. Now make no mistake, there is no excuse for my illegal, deliberate, and foolish decisions at the U. I'm just trying to help you better understand who I was at the age of 16, 17, 18 years old when all this happened. And I acknowledge the wrong that I did with the hope that other young men and women will see me, hear me, and do better by avoiding the same mistakes that I made and prioritizing the right things in life. During my first year at OU, I got a girl pregnant and school stopped being my first focus. I missed basketball tryouts, my grades took a nosedive, and after the 1998 fall semester, I was put on academic probation. In early 1999, I bumped into Chris Jordan at a John Marshall basketball game. He wasn't in school at the time and expressed he wanted to play basketball in Houston, but that he couldn't pass the ACTs to get into college. So I told Chris I had an idea. He could pay me some money and I'd help him to get into college by taking the ACT for him. This is how we started hanging around each other. I distinctly remember Jimmy coming back from Grambling State to go to school here in Oklahoma and getting on my case about being around Chris. He reminded me that we didn't hang around Chris because he was bad news for a reason. Despite my best friend's warnings and my better judgment, Chris was someone I wanted to help. I wanted to help him have the same opportunities we had to go to school and play basketball. And he was willing to pay me to help him do that. And I needed money to support the child I believe I had on the way. So I abandoned the values I was raised with and continued to hang around Chris, ignoring the wrong I knew he was up to because I didn't think he could affect me. I wasn't doing it with him. Every day for the past 22 years, I have regretted these decisions. And I hope my story can be a lesson for all young people that keeping the wrong company and sacrificing your values for a few bucks comes at a very high price. It can cost you 22 years of your life, or it can literally cause your death. Wednesday, July 28, 1999 was the beginning of the end of my life. I had just celebrated my 19th birthday on Sunday. A friend of mine, Erica, had dropped off a belated birthday present to me on Tuesday. It was a large birthday cookie. I spent that Wednesday evening at my parents' home playing games with my sister, Antoinette, and my brother, Antonio. My mom fixed spaghetti, and after we ate, my brother and I played dominoes while my mom fixed my sister's hair. My brother, Antonio, worked the overnight shift at Texaco Travel Stop at the time. His shift started at 10 p.m. and he was off by 6 in the morning. My mom left the house to take my brother to work between 9:30 and 10 p.m. I can remember sitting on my parents' staircase talking to my mother before she left to take my brother to work. I was at home with my mom and dad when my sister left, and I was at home with them when she got back. While my mom was gone, I found out that my siblings had eaten most of my birthday cookie, which I had been trying to save behind my back. I remember complaining to her about this when she walked in the back door. I fell asleep waiting on Chris to come pick me up later that night because the transmission leak on my car hadn't been fixed, and I needed to pick up some clean clothes from my apartment in Norman, near OU's campus. Chris picked me up between 11 and 11:30 that night. I was pissed that he was so late. We had words after I got into the car, and I asked him where he'd been. He looked off and told me that he'd gotten into it with some guys and shot at them. I was shocked, but I didn't ask more questions, thinking the less I knew, the better. I picked up some clean clothes in my apartment in Norman, and then I went with Chris to his older brother Lamon's apartment on the south side of Oklahoma City. We hung out there for a while, drinking, talking, and playing dominoes. And then I called my girlfriend Annalise from Lamon's apartment, and I fell asleep at some point. Early the next morning, Chris drove me to pick up my car to take to another auto shop for the transmission repair. Then he dropped me off at my parents' house. Back at my parents' house, I went back to sleep. After waking up, sometime during the afternoon, Liddell King, who I just met just a few weeks earlier through Chris, paged me looking for Chris. I told him I didn't know where Chris was at, and I had last seen him earlier that morning. Eventually, Liddell told me he needed help moving the car and led me to believe he would give me money if I helped him move it. I wanted money, so I agreed. Liddell picked me up from my parents' house and drove me over to his apartments where a Suburban was parked. He asked me to follow him in the Suburban, and I refused, since I was fairly certain the car was stolen based on what I'd heard, how he went to prison before for having stolen parts on his car that he had wrecked. Since I wouldn't get inside the Suburban, Liddell drove instead. I followed him driving his red Firebird. Liddell parked the Suburban outside of a grocery store I'd never been to before and then went inside. I only waited for about a minute or so, but it felt like forever. So I went in to see what Liddell was doing. I can't remember if he bought anything, but when I walked in the store, he finally walked out. Liddell left the Suburban where it was. He got into the Firebird with me and he drove us over to an auto shop not too far away from the grocery store. Liddell got out of the car and went into the garage while I waited in the car. He came back a little later looking spooked and didn't say a word to me. He drove over in silence back to where the Suburban was parked and sat behind it for a minute or two. When he finally spoke, he told me that the shop didn't want the Suburban because there was a body on it. I took that to probably mean someone had been shot or killed. I know at this point I should have gone to the police. I didn't because I was scared. I didn't know what the devil was talking about, and I think I could get in trouble for helping him move the vehicle. I've regretted that decision also for the past 22 years. Liddell wanted to find Chris and ultimately found him in Mecklenburg Rec Center, where we'd often go and play basketball. When I finally walked into the gym, they appeared to be in the middle of a very serious discussion. Liddell ended up leaving by himself, and Chris told me he had something to go do. He took me back to my parents' house and then wanted to use the phone. And while he was waiting for a call back, he asked to see the news. That's when I learned that a man had been shot and killed in Evan the night before during the robbery of a Suburban. It was at this point that things started to add up for me that Chris and Liddell were involved in this. It was stupid of me and naive of me not to go to the police with what I knew, but I was scared. I didn't know what to say at the time, not just for myself, but for my family as well. It was after midnight, maybe 1 a.m., early Friday morning when Chris called and asked me to come pick him up because he was locked out of his grandmother's house. I went and picked him up and drove back to my parents' house. I stayed downstairs on the couch using the phone, while Chris ended up going upstairs to use the phone in the old bedroom, in my own bedroom. By the time I woke up later that Friday morning, Chris had already left. Since my dad had been asking me to cut the grass, I did that, and then I made plans to meet up with a girl named Jamilah later on. While talking with her on the phone, I received a call on the other line, and it turned out to be Liddell. I thought it was weird that he wanted to know what I was doing. After talking with him, I ended up getting another phone call. This person identified himself as Detective Flowers and asked if I was home. I knew something wasn't right, and I told him that Julius wasn't there, and I hung up. I left out of my parents' house through the back door to go find Chris, figuring the calls I had gotten had something to do with him. When I found Chris, he said that he needed to go to Liddell's apartment to find out what was going on. Liddell's girlfriend told us the police had already taken Liddell, and Chris told her that he straightened everything out. After we got back in the car, he asked me to go warn his brother Layman that the police were looking for them. Since I was trying to avoid the police, I did that and stayed at Layman's apartment overnight because I saw the news and I was afraid with all the police outside my parents' house. I told my girlfriend Annalise that I needed to try to find a lawyer to help me clear my name. I was asleep when the police arrested me early Saturday morning at Layman's apartment. They didn't even give me time to put on a shirt, pulling me out of bed and placing me in handcuffs. What happened after that was a whirlwind. Initially, Barry Albert represented me, but after he died in October of 2000, 3 new lawyers were assigned to represent me. I spent very little time with any of them except Robin McPhail, who was the youngest lawyer on the team, and spent most of the time coming to the county jail to visit with me about my case. She understood that I was at my parents' house at the time Mr. Howell was shot and had only gone to the south side much later that night. The lead lawyer on my case, David McKenzie, rarely came to the county jail to visit me at all. He usually spoke to me in court on my designated court dates, and that's about it. Those conversations were usually brief, like 5 to 10 minutes or so. At no time did I ever tell him I was not in my parents' house when Mr. Howell was shot. If he thought I told him something different, he's wrong. And had he spoken to me more than a few times, he would have known that. He would have also known I wanted to testify. In fact, up until he rested my case without putting on any evidence of my defense, I thought I was going to testify and explain to the jury exactly where I was at and what I had did and didn't do. Instead, David McKenzie rested my case without consulting me at all. Seeing that I was upset, he reminded me not to make a scene in front of the jury. He had told me before my trial that if I showed too much emotions, the jury could execute me. So when I went before Judge Bass, I felt trapped when he asked me, was it my choice not to testify? I told him that yes, it was my choice, but in reality, I was just following my lawyer's advice, trying not to make a scene in front of the jury. I am here before you today to tell you what I never got to tell the jury in my trial. Yes, I've made many mistakes in my youth, but I did not kill Mr. Paul Howell. I hope that my experiences of being convicted and sentenced to die for something I didn't do because I chose to hang around the wrong people and lost sight of what mattered most, not fully understanding the impact of my choices, can be a lesson to young people facing the same social and economic pressures I faced. In the many years I have survived behind bars, time and time again, I have relied on the values my parents instilled in me and my siblings growing up. From my mom and my dad, I learned the importance of giving back. My mom is a public school teacher. Her passion for education and helping others has stood out to me since I was little. She has worn her heart on her sleeve and has shared it with so many. My dad is the same way, whether he was coaching me, my siblings, or our friends, or supporting us from the sidelines. He always made sure we got to and from practices and games, and that included taking other kids who needed a ride or some guidance on both. The occasional stop for food also included whichever friends or teammates also needed to eat. Even though I may have seemed as though I wasn't paying attention to what they were imparting, I was. I was listening to the things my parents said and watched the things they did. Over the past 22 years, I have experienced profound sorrow, even despair, as a result of Mr. Howell's death and facing execution for something I didn't do. It was out of that despair and after my appeals were denied that I wrote to Mrs. Tobin. I did so in a desperate attempt to show her that I could not have been the person who took her brother's life based on her own eyewitness description. I truly wish Mr. Howell was alive today. I wish I could turn back time. I wish I had made better decisions in my youth, but I can't change any of that. What I can do is do my part to make the world better. For me, that looks like helping young people recognize and avoid the mistakes I've made, helping them pursue their dreams, because nothing simply happens the way you want it to happen. It requires hard work and perseverance. If my life is spared and my freedom granted, I am grateful for the support I will have from my family and from ARC, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, for offering to enroll me in all this programming and sending a letter directly to Governor Stitt confirming it all. Part of their mission is to improve the outcomes of formerly incarcerated individuals and building healthier communities. They do this by providing housing, counseling, education, peer support, and job readiness. They have also offered me a paid internship where I can learn computer skills as well as skills in customer service and research. These skills can help me implement my vision of operating a nonprofit to help at-risk youth. I have been fortunate to have had the opportunity already to advance this vision by talking to students and young people around the state and the country about the mistakes I've made and how to avoid them. This is my passion. I don't want any young person to make the same mistakes I've made by associating with the wrong people and being blind to how the ways of life can quickly and dramatically change for the worse. I don't want anyone living with the deep regret I feel about the dumb decisions I've made, like shoplifting for quick money and putting myself in situations to be blamed for things I didn't do. I want to play a part in preventing that for young people. I pray for the opportunity to continue doing this as a contributing member of society and hopefully one day as a free man. Thank you to this Pardon and Parole Board. Thank you to all the people who have taken the time to fully listen to my story and to all those near and far who have supported me over the years. And my sincerest prayers are with the Howe family, always.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. At this time, we will open it up for questions from any of the board members.
Mr. Jones, you wrote a letter to Ms. Presley that said, so you're going to have to do something for me now for your safety. Not that I'm threatening you, but I got some, and I'll skip the wording there. If you do get called to the stand, and this is November 21st of 1999, your best bet is to say you don't remember unless you don't care about me coming home. You agree you wrote that letter, sir?
Yes, sir. But the reason I said what I said was because I was attempting to try to shield her from what I know she was afraid of.
Okay.
It was ill-advised in my youth, but I was not threatening her.
You can certainly see how that looks like you're trying to get her to coach or change her testimony. You can see how that might be read that way, correct?
Yes, sir. But again.
And then again, Mr. Jones, in November 3rd of 2000, you wrote a letter that says, and if you do end up having to testify, do not tell them people that I was doing anything illegal, okay? Just tell them that you really don't know. You wrote that letter as well, did you not, sir?
Yes, sir. Are you finished asking me a question?
I'm asking you, did you write that letter?
I'm asking you, are you finished asking your question so I can fully answer it, sir?
Yes. Did you write that letter?
Yes, sir. Again, as I said, I was.
And you did have 25 caliber bullets in your car. When it was found, you know that, right?
That's what they say, sir. I never had any 25 caliber bullets.
Okay.
I believe my.
Let's talk about July 29th of 1999. 6 days before Mr. Howe was murdered. Do you recall pleading guilty to taking a Mercedes-Benz from Mr. Lapsey?
Are you finished answering your question?
Yes, sir. Did you plead guilty to that crime?
Yes, sir. I ended up pleading guilty to that crime because I originally was represented by Mrs. Gina Walker, who had left the office. And upon our investigation, she was trying to get those charges dismissed because there was really no evidence that I committed that crime. But when they took me back to court in 2006, when I pled guilty to this, I had a new lawyer who I hadn't had for more than 30 days. And the judge told me I was going to trial on Monday. And that wasn't her problem, that I had just got a new lawyer. And I felt the pressure that I had to, because I didn't want to take the chance of getting, convicted of another crime I didn't commit.
Okay, so you pled guilty to that? Yes.
Yes,
okay, and you stated that there was no evidence that was found linking you to that crime, yet the car was found at your apartment complex in Norman, correct?
That's what I'm told. I have never seen that vehicle. I've never been in it.
Okay, you have no reason to dispute that it was found and seen at your apartment complex.
Again, I've never seen it, so I don't know if that's what the police report say, then that's what the police report say. So
And at that particular crime, you pled guilty and you spelled the word Mercedes with a Z. That is exactly like the tag that was in the car, also spelled with a Z. Is that correct?
that is correct, sir.
Okay, so there is some evidence linking you to that crime.
No, sir.
Okay.
To
And
answer
that
the question,
crime that you pled guilty to, you were wearing a bandana. If believed that you pled guilty to the crime, you were wearing a bandana over your face and you pointed a gun at Mr. Lapsey and took that vehicle, which later ended up at your apartment. Is that correct?
I didn't catch all of what you just said, sir. Could you repeat it?
Absolutely. So when you say there was no evidence linking you to that crime, there was evidence linking to the crime, correct? In at least enough that you pled guilty to it.
Again, sir, I explained to you that I had just got a new lawyer, and the judge told me that she was not going to give us any more time.
Okay.
That is the reason why I felt the pressure to plead guilty to that crime. I did not commit that crime. I did not wear bandanas back then. And
Okay.
there was no bandana that connected me to that robbery.
Okay. Let's talk about your alibi. You were present in March of 2005 when that evidentiary hearing was held, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you recall this 3 or 4 days of testimony where your mother and father testified, and I think your siblings testified. You recall all that, do you not, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you also recall Ms. Cujo, who your mother said was there that night, saying that she wasn't there that night, that they were mistaken. You recall her testifying to that, correct?
Yes, sir. I do recall her testifying. She said that she was over at my parents' house that day.
Okay.
She said she wasn't there at the time of the murder.
And specifically, I want to talk about your attorneys, Malcolm Savage and David McKenzie. You were present when they testified at that hearing as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Malcolm, let's start with Malcolm Savage. Malcolm Savage was questioned about whether or not you said, or what your statements were, and he said, quote, "We had information from Mr. Jones himself saying that his parents were mistaken about that night, which night it was, that the night that they were all talking about was the previous night." Do you recall Mr. Savage testifying to that, sir?
Yes, sir.
And you recall him, David McKenzie, also testifying at that hearing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the question was posed to him now, when your parents were given this description to you, or I'm sorry, when the parents gave this description to you, being David McKenzie, about the claim that they were making, did you discuss that with your client, Julius Jones? To which David McKenzie answers, "I do." And the question is posed to him, tell us about that conversation. The answer is, "I discussed it with him more than once, and he said he was not at home that evening, that his parents must be mistaken." You recall that testimony, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And finally, he says, the question is, Mr. Julius Jones denied to you that he was home the evening of the homicide. And the answer was, "Yes, ma'am." But he was unequivocal that he was not at home with his parents, as his parents had described with regard to the evening that Mr. Howe was murdered. He was not at home. That was testified to, correct?
I believe so, sir. Yes.
By 2 attorneys that were under oath, correct? Your attorneys.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And you heard them testify to this, but you did not testify at that hearing to what you're claiming now, correct?
I did not testify because my lawyers advised me that this was about a narrow legal issue regarding my lawyer's performance, at trial.
Okay. So finally, I want to ask you just a couple more questions and then I'm done, okay? You just testified that, and you did not testify at your trial, correct?
No, sir, I did not.
And you were aware that a hearing is held and David McKenzie, well, let me just read it. Give me a second. Okay, so you stated that you were
Go ahead, sir.
You ready, sir? Okay. You stated that you were shocked when the defense was arrested and you didn't get to testify, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that you had a hearing in front of Judge Jerry Bass, and I'll just read it to you. You were sworn in at that point, correct? Sworn to tell the truth.
Yes, sir. After my lawyer had already arrested. Yes, sir.
The court says, Mr. Jones, you heard Mr. McKenzie announce that the defense was resting. Your answer is yes, sir. The court says, well, we've all had some discussions about whether or not you were going to testify. We've all had some discussions about whether or not you were going to testify. And that means you're not going to testify. Is that correct? You answered correct. And then the court said, all right, you understand that your right to testify is a personal decision of your own. Of course, you may have the advice of counsel, but it is a personal decision whether to testify or not testify on your behalf. Have you determined with the assistance of counsel not to testify? You answered, yes, sir. And the court said, is that a free and personal decision of your own? You said, yes, sir. And then finally, it says, has Mr. McKenzie or anyone else put any pressure on you, coerced you, or made any promises or any benefits to testify? And you said, no, sir. And then your answer was, the question was, that this is a choice of your own free will. Your answer was, yes, sir. Is that a pretty accurate description of that hearing?
Yes, but it's leaving out the connotation of what I said a while ago, is that my lawyer had informed me before the trial not to show a whole bunch of emotion in front of the jury. So I was terrified to say anything other than what he advised me to say. I don't know the law. I didn't know the law, especially back then. I was only 20, 21 years old. So I did what he told me to do.
I'm sorry, I don't want to talk over you, sir. Were you finished?
Yes, sir. I just said I did what my lawyer advised me to do because I was terrified.
Okay, so you didn't say anything at that hearing because you didn't want to appear emotional or upset in front of the jury?
Yes, sir, because this is what he advised me before the trial.
Okay. Mr. Jones, the jury wasn't present at this hearing. That hearing was outside the presence of the jury. Those hearings are always outside the presence of the jury. The jury wasn't there.
When he asked me, we were standing in the courtroom, sir.
No, but that hearing was outside the presence of the jury, sir. They weren't there. You could have shown whatever emotion or said whatever you wanted to. There was no jury present.
No, sir, that's not true.
It is true, sir. All those things are always outside the presence of the jury. Those discussions are improper to be had in front of a jury.
No, sir, I'm saying that I did not want to show emotion in front of the judge as well. I was terrified.
In front of the judge?
Yes, in front of that. I don't know how court proceedings work. I hadn't been in courts like this.
So now your testimony is that it was the judge you were concerned about.
I'm telling you, we were in the courtroom when he asked me these questions, sir. We weren't in the judge's chamber.
Yes, sir. I understand that, but the jury wasn't there.
Mr. Jones, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the PIN numbers that you've been using on the phone calls recently. If you could just take a few minutes and explain to us what's going on with that.
So originally, the reason why I used someone else's PIN number was because mine was frozen or wouldn't work. They didn't know what the problem was. I also used someone else's PIN number. The same person. It's never been multiple other people. It's only one other person. And again, they knew that I used this, the counselors here knew that I used this other person's PIN number because I just wanted to talk to my family. I've always just wanted to talk to my family. I mean, I've never been conducting any kind of illegal or illicit business. It's just me to stay in touch with my family.
Okay. Thank you. Do any other board members have questions? Okay, Mr. Jones, we've reviewed this information thoroughly most of this year. We've spent, this is now our second hearing covering this information. It's our first time hearing from you. I know that you've probably thought about this moment for a long time. Is there anything that we have not talked about or asked you about that you would like to discuss with us today?
Just, I would like to address the family in the essence of, I have felt terrible, about their loss. And I don't never want it to get lost that we did not, or me and my family do not recognize that they've lost a loved one. I have, lived with that thought every single day and carried the weight of them hating me for something I didn't even do. I know I have broken the laws, but I've never been a violent man. If you really look at my actual record, it is larceny. It doesn't make it, any better that I just stole things, but I've never accosted people. That was not what I was into. But again, I just want to have family to know, man, I do recognize their loss. And I hope at some point they get to heal and to keep cherishing their loved one. And I hope this board gets the chance to really, examine who I am and not the fear that's been talked about me and the hate, because this is not about hate, it's just about the truth. And the truth is, I didn't shoot that man. I didn't kill Mr. Paul Allen. I wasn't involved in it in any way. I wasn't present. I didn't even know he had been killed until after the fact. I wish I could have made better decisions when I was younger. I wish, but I can't change the past. And I mean, that's all I ask you all to consider.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. This is going to conclude this portion of the meeting. And we are going to take a 10-minute recess before reconvening for discussion and final vote. Thank you again for appearing before us today.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We interrupt your programming right now to go back to the Julius Jones clemency hearing.
Let's get back to that live right now.
Other than innocence, I didn't hear mitigation. I didn't hear, I just didn't hear that. And that disappointed me. To believe, in my opinion, to believe in Mr. Jones's theory of the case, you have to disbelieve every other piece of evidence in the case. Everything. Law enforcement, independent witnesses, other witnesses, you just have to, and the physical evidence, and you have to believe that his version over every other piece of evidence. And I am very concerned that that's a near impossibility. And I'm concerned that Mr. Jones was not entirely truthful with us today, because when he said that about being in front of the jury, I knew that to be not true. And that was a carefully crafted and written statement, I'm sure very thoroughly vetted by his attorneys. But his attorneys don't practice law in the state of Oklahoma. And those hearings are always outside the presence of the jury, so it doesn't taint the defendant. And he was not truthful with this board. It's about the truth here.
No, you may not. Nope. Just as a reminder, there is no more discussion from members of the public. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Any other discussion from members of the board? All right. As a reminder, for clemency hearings, the way this is going to go is we will vote, and then members of the board will exit, followed by members of Mr. Howell's family and other victims' representatives in the Office of the Attorney General, followed by the legal counsel for Mr. Jones and members of Mr. Jones's family, and then members of the public and the media, and Mr. Bates will be directing that. following the departure of members of the board. We will, at the conclusion of this clemency hearing, reconvene tomorrow morning at 8:30 for the rest of the regularly scheduled November meeting for the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board. Is there any other discussion? Okay, Melinda, will you please call the vote?
Kelly Doyle.
As I stated last month, I continue to believe that there is doubt in this case in which the ultimate punishment should not be utilized. So I'm yes for clemency.
Richard Smotherman.
No.
Larry Morris.
Before I cast my vote, and I realize that the only thing I'm obligated to do is to say yes or no, but I think that fairness on both sides are at least deserving of hearing what I have to say and hearing my opinions. All morning long, at least since 9 o'clock, we have heard discussions from both sides, both very well represented. One claiming that Mr. Jones is definitely guilty of murdering Mr. Howell. The other side presented an equally good argument saying that he is not guilty. There's one thing that I know of this case is that Mr. Jones was tried and convicted, and all the way through the appellate process, he has been unsuccessful in getting the case overturned. Ordinarily, during a parole hearing, we are charged with the responsibility of giving the inmates some choices about their future. In this particular case, it's been stepped up a notch in that we now have the responsibility of making a recommendation as to whether or not this young man even has a future. There are a couple of things that actually do trouble me. Not so much about his guilt or innocence, but it is mainly the disparity in sentencing. If Christopher Jordan is equally culpable in this murder and received on paper, a 30-year sentence, which in reality was a 15-year sentence, and I am certainly convinced that anyone who's familiar with the criminal justice system, even 20 years ago, would have been able to determine that that 30-year sentence would have only amounted to 15 years. So there is a huge disparity in the sentencing, and to give one person 15 years and then execute the second one, there is something inherently wrong in that decision, in my opinion. The other thing that I do know is that this board, even though it may or may not be our role to determine whether or not someone is guilty or innocent, we do have the authority to make a recommendation to the governor based on our own opinions as to whether or not this man is deserving of some mercy and some leniency in his sentencing. And at this point, I am convinced that he is deserving of that, and my vote is yes for clemency.
Adam Luck.
For the reasons previously stated at the commutation hearing, my vote is yes to recommend clemency.
Clemency is recommended.
Kyle, will you please explain the board's options under our administrative rules?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. According to the clemency hearing rules, it states the board will vote to deny or recommend clemency to the governor for the offender before the clemency hearing is adjourned. If clemency is recommended, the board may include a recommendation for commutation. The board may discuss the matter before voting. The board is not required to state reasons when they vote. That's the section on voting.
Is there any discussion?
No.
Do you need a motion? Okay. Hearing no discussion, I would make the motion to recommend, along with clemency, commuting the sentence to life with the possibility of parole. Hearing a second from Mr. Morris. Belinda, would you please call the vote on the motion?
Kelly Doyle,
Yes.
Richard Smotherman,
No.
Larry Morris,
Yes.
Adam Luck,
Yes.
motion to commute to life with the possibility of parole has been carried out by a vote of 3 to 4.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here. This concludes the clemency hearing. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 8:30.
And you heard it right there. The breaking news, clemency has been granted for Julius Jones.
Has been recommended for Julius Jones in a 3-to-1 vote, and now that vote will head to Governor Stitt,
Yes,
who has the final say. We've got KOCO Zach Rael, who's been on the ground in front of the Department of Corrections with supporters of Julius Jones. Zach, let's listen in on some reaction there.
Yeah, hey guys, we're here live. You just heard that reaction, the crowd breaking out in cheers. Obviously, this is what they've been waiting for. This is what they were hoping for. I'm going to see if I can get some quick reaction from you. Cece, can I just get a quick comment from you? What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, I'm just giving God all the honor, the glory, and the praise. You know, Julius had another opportunity
Y'all
today,
wait just a few minutes.
and he was able to speak on his own behalf. And I just thank God for what God has accomplished here in Oklahoma and for the Jones family. Our sincere condolences continue to go out to the Howell family. I know it's a hard day for them. But you know, the truth sets us all free, and we can't heal if we don't have the truth. So Julius got to tell the truth today for his own self, so I'm grateful.
JB, how are you feeling? What are you thinking right now?
I feel good. I'm like she said, we're definitely thinking about the Howell family. Today's going to be a difficult day for them, and we just know that, you know, we want them to know that we're still standing with them, and we're just happy that the truth was heard today, and we're on to the next part. So.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for giving us your reaction. Thank you. All right, guys, you heard it there. The first reaction to this Julius Jones granted clemency here by the Pardon and Parole Board. A very celebratory mood here right now. Supporters, again, breaking out in cheers. We're going to continue to talk with them, get more reactions, and we'll bring you the very latest this evening at 5 and 6 on KOCO. I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio for now. Reporting live, Zach Rael, KOCO 5 News. Back to you.
All right, Zach, thank you very much. So again, just to recap, the Pardon and Parole Board has recommended clemency for Julius Jones in a 3-to-1 vote, recommending life with the possibility of parole.
And all of it now sits in the hands of Governor Kevin Stitt. Of course, we're going to try to work for reaction from the governor's office. We have our team of reporters in the field covering this story all day. Make sure you tune in tonight at 5 and 6, and also download that KOCO app. All the updates straight to your phone.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you guys so much for being patient by listening to that. I know it was a little bit lengthy, but it's super important, and that's probably the biggest update. And there's still a lot of things that I don't quite understand as far as the process. So a lot of us are kind of learning as we go. So here's, matter of fact, maybe I can Google it real quick. I don't know why I never thought to do this. So the word clemency actually just means mercy or lenience. A pardon is a government decision to allow a person to be relieved of some or all legal consequences resulting from a criminal conviction. A pardon may be granted before or after a conviction for the crime, depending on the laws of the jurisdiction. So what does clemency mean? Clemency is the process by which a governor, president, or administrative board may reduce a defendant's sentence or grant a pardon. Clemencies have been granted in death penalty cases for a variety of reasons. So, does that mean that he's not going to death row? I'm not 100% sure. I want to say yes, but I'm not sure about that, because let's just say if the governor denies their recommendation, because that's all it is a recommendation from his own board, okay? It's the governor's board, the clemency board. Now, if he denies their recommendation, I don't really know what that means, but I'm not going to even think about that at this point. So what we're going to think is that if his board recommended it, that Governor Stitt is going to go with what his board agreed to do and agreed to sentence him for. And then we're going to, once we get that yes from him, then we're going to hope that at that point that he could be granted parole. If he gets life with the possibility of parole, that they will grant parole at that point, then get him out. It's still a process. It is just a huge mess. And everybody, except the people who did the murder, which is real cold, everybody continues to suffer in this process except for the people who actually committed this murder. Isn't that something? The people who are actually putting this thing in motion, stealing the Suburban, trying to get the Suburban sold, and having a part to play in this wild and unreal nightmare. The people who should be held accountable haven't been held accountable. But an individual who did not commit this murder, seems like this entire thing was pinned on him. And he was that close. We're talking about a matter of a couple of weeks, maybe less, that this man could have lost his life for a crime that he didn't commit. I would encourage you guys continue, and shout out to my friend JB. I actually know JB. I've known JB since middle school. Shout out to Reverend Cece. Shout out to his sister, Julius Jones' sister, the mom, the dad, the brothers, family, friends, my John Marshall family, my Northside family, OKC family, and all of the supporters that have supported around the world, including Kim Kardashian, including Trey Young, Blake Griffin, so many other athletes. I can't even think of them all. He used to play at OU. He was a quarterback. I forgot his freaking name that quick. Baker Mayfield. Thank you. Thank you for not letting me forget his name. Baker Mayfield from the NFL, and so many other different people, man. I just can't thank all of them. But thank them all for banding together, speaking his voice. Thank you to Viola Davis. Thank you to for her for putting the Last Stand documentary together. And if you guys want to see the full story and how we got to this point, you absolutely must look it up. The documentary, the story of Julius Jones, The Last Stand. It is absolutely an incredible documentary. The trials and tribulations of this young man. We hope that Julius Jones gets out, he gets free, and he is able to restart his life. Thank you guys so much for listening with an open mind as well as an open heart. And again, our thoughts and prayers also go to the Howell family, Paul Howell, because they're still suffering and these wounds continue to keep getting picked at and poked. And I know it's such a deep, deep hurt for a family member that they would never get back. Thank y'all so much for listening and being fair to both sides. But again, we also pray for justice for Julius. He did not do this murder. Okay. Thank y'all for listening. We'll see you guys on the next story. Thank you.